Um, I'm proud to introduce, like I said, Mr. John Werenko. And it's not that I can't say it, it's just that I can't remember it.
Well, the way I tell people, it's Werenko.
Okay.
Just they were and co.
Okay. Werenko. You know what? I got it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, John.
Okay. I've been given 10 minutes, so I put together some quick notes here. I also have, make sure you all have the notes in front of you because it makes it go much quicker that way. The other problem is that we had a technical problem. We were supposed to be able to project my portfolio up on the wall, but what we will do is I have my laptop here and we'll put the lights out, and if you can strain your vision, you might be able to see it from a distance, okay? But that's the reason why I did this, the paperwork, because I'm also an admissions director for many, many years, and I traveled the country. And every time I'd go someplace, I never knew what I was going to have to face. So I became a belt and suspenders man. Just be prepared for anything, okay? So anyway, I first want to thank KJ Waters and DK Kerr for their invitation today to have me speak to you. Unfortunately, KJ has a family issue, as you just heard about the board, and she's not able to be here today. But she was my original contact. That's how I found out about the organization, was through her. I also want to introduce my daughter, Christina Kerr. She's my tech person. She tried like crazy to help us get all hooked up, but we were just missing some cables. You know? I also want to welcome Professor Jorge Morales from Texas Tech University and his lovely wife, Elizabeth. He and I are working on an article together that I'm illustrating. And I'm really privileged to have a relationship with a tech professor as brilliant as Jorge is. And he's going to say, don't say that, but it's true. The guy's brilliant. So is his wife. She's in the writing program at Texas Tech. So I'm very glad to. And I've only been here 4 years, and really only 2 if you don't count COVID and the fact that I had to build a house. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm going to have several quotations that I'm going to give you, and then I've got some books I want to show you, and then I'll do the slides. There's several quotations I think are really important. One is by, believe it or not, Leonardo da Vinci. And he said, "You cannot be an accomplished artist unless you're able to capture the expression on a man's face falling from an 8-story building as he passes you by." The other one is Pablo Picasso said, "Every human being is born an artist. The trick is staying one the rest of your life." Oh. And those are 2 just great quotations, okay? And they're really not about any particular art you make. They're about creativity. It's about what it takes to be creative. Before we go into the portfolio, I want to go over the 4 projects that I've been working on over the last 10 years, which are in my slide portfolio. One is called Occam's Looking Glass. I'm originally a fine artist and an art educator and an arts administrator. I came to illustration as I approach retirement. And primarily, as it says in my blurb, I have a sister who writes children's story, and she asked me to illustrate them for her. And so that kind of got me interested in the idea of going down the illustration route, but continue to do my fine art painting and so on. So the Occam's Looking Glass, I'll explain it a little bit later. I have another one I'm working on is called Thrice Told Tales Connections. It is an illustrated autobiography of me and my family. I come from a very large family, 8 children, and I'm the oldest. So I'm illustrating this, and I'm about 1/3 of the way into my life. Okay. The other one is the one I mentioned about my sister's books. They're called The Elf and the Tree, and I have slides of those. The last one is an art history book. It took me 8 years to do the research for this book, and I'll explain a little more. It's about the female form in art over the last 20,000 years. And I chose the title Classic Pinups Through the Ages because the book is a textbook, and textbooks don't sell very well unless you have a catchy title. Everybody knows what a pinup is. And the fact is that you can have the Venus of Wallendorf 20,000 years ago as a pinup, or you can have Marilyn Monroe in the 20th century as a pinup. They're all the same. So it's an art history book for an art college, and it's heavily illustrated. If you go to the next page, I want to give you some references that you can look up, bibliography. Number 1 is The History of the Illustrated Book by John Harthane. Excellent book. I recommend it highly if you're interested in illustration. Another one is Ways of Seeing by John Berger. It originally was a BBC series on television. It's an excellent book, Ways of Seeing. The work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. This is a really important thing for painters, sculptors, printmakers, and traditional photographers. The whole idea of mechanical reproduction and what it does to fine art. A very excellent book. The other one is The View from the Studio Door, How Artists Find Their Way in an Uncertain World. He addresses this actually to students in college majoring in art. What are you going to do after you graduate? And he has some excellent recommendations. So if you know any artists, I'd really recommend this book. The next one is The Human Figure. You can't be an illustrator unless you know how to draw and paint the human figure. And I was privileged enough to have taught with this gentleman, David K. Rubens, at the Herron School of Art of Indiana University. It's a Penguin book. It's a staple in the whole area of the anatomy of the human form for artists. It's a very excellent book. The next one is The History of the Ideal Woman and Where That Has Left Us. It's interesting because I went online to see if you could still see the animation. It was produced by CNN, but you can go online, put that title in, you can see it with still images and the text. But the original animation was terrific. The animation is the book I produced. In other words, if I was going to produce an animation, that would be it from the book. Okay. So just go online and check that out. See the next one. Oh yeah, if you are an artist and you're interested and you're doing the human figure, this is called Skin Tones and Oil. It's an excellent book. It's a step-by-step guide of how to do the human form in oils. And that's a big deal for me because I do it all the time. Okay. Now, the next quotation is from John Harthane. It's about, you can see it on page 3. It's about illustration. He says, illustration may be approached from different viewpoints. One is to study the technique used. This is a valuable exercise, but to concentrate exclusively on techniques and to look at illustrations primarily as examples of graphic art is to ignore the complex relationship between picture and text. And this is what Occam's Looking Glass, all my paintings are about. Picture and text. The relationship between language and art. And the whole historical social hinterland from which books emerge. Book illustration is like a hand mirror in which one can see reflected great historical scenes, social changes, and the movement of ideas through the centuries. He also says book illustration has always been concerned with communication. It has to interpret or to amplify a text, a function which distinguishes it from painting and sculpture. So when I'm illustrating, I'm doing a different kind of art than when I'm painting, although they're interconnected. And for a long time, people sort of looked down at people who were illustrators, like Norman Rockwell, who is now praised as a great artist, okay? And as a matter of fact, I attended a show in Stockbridge, Massachusetts at the Andy Warhol Museum, in which it was Andy Warhol and Rockwell. An interesting combination. Fine art and illustration combined. It was an outstanding exhibition. I hope they do it again. Also, I found out that Andy Warhol's younger brother was a children's book illustrator. Finally, traditional literary illustration, in the best sense of the word, is illustration which does not dominate the text. And I'll give you an example of illustration by a very famous artist that dominates the text. It is the 150th anniversary edition of Alice in Wonderland, and they asked Salvador Dali to do the illustrations. Turns out that it's more about Salvador Dali than it's about Lewis Carroll. That's what Hawthorne says, that it should not dominate the text. It should integrate with the text. It should explicate the text, okay? He didn't do that. Oh. But because of his name, he got away with it. Oh. Now I want to turn to my drawing and painting portfolio. It's on page 4. Turning to my portfolio, I have a quote from Rudolf Arnheim, and I had the privilege of working with Professor Arnheim when I was vice president of the Institute for Humanities Research at Indiana University, and I brought him from Ann Arbor, Michigan, University of Michigan, down for a week-long symposium. And he is an incredible man, unfortunately passed away, but I'd like to quote from him. In his book, Visual Thinking, Images then regard the world in two opposite directions. They hover somewhere above the realms of practical things and below the disembodied forces animating those things. They can be said to mediate between the two. Paintings and drawings in my portfolio are derived from an original work that I refer to as Modern Illuminated Manuscript, titled Occam's Looking Glass. My artwork is based on Occam's razor, which states that entities ought not to be multiplied beyond necessity. In addition, I've been influenced by Ludwig Wittgenstein's picture theory of language, to be found in his Tractatus, and his language game theory, found in his philosophical investigations. So that's pretty much my introduction. Now I'm going to try to project these images for you and then take a few questions because my time is limited, okay? So if we could turn the lights out. I don't know, I guess is that a light on?
I think it's up there.
Can you see it at all? I don't know if
Yes.
this
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's this one.
How am I doing on time, okay? A few more minutes?
Couple.
Okay. You can't put that out, huh?
I think
But
it's okay. It's
You can
okay.
see it, okay. This is my portfolio, Occam's Looking Glass. This is a painting that is 4 foot square. It's made up of individual canvases. You can actually move the painting around and you become part of the creative process by recreating the painting. There are a multiplicity of ways in which that painting can be reconfigured, and you can be part of the artist process. So I'm going to go quickly through that. These are just, again, 4 foot square. These are smaller. These are all watercolor. The others are oils. These are all watercolor ink. And these are smaller drawings. This is the book that I'm working from. It is a collection of short stories, poems, and essays. The short stories that I'm doing are actually from cinematic images taken from a film by Elaine René called Last Year at Marienbad. And it includes the verbal subtitles on the painting are in addition to the image itself. So this is the actual book. It's one of a kind. I call it a palimpsest, which is based on a medieval concept of parchments, because parchments were made from animal skins. Books were highly precious, more precious than gold. If they couldn't get it, they sometimes scraped it off and added another text on top of it in order to save the skin. So it's called a palimpsest, and my images are transparent images, one layer on top of another. This is from the stills from the René film, Last Year at Marienbad. I pull texts out that are not directly related to the image. So you have to find the connection between the text and the image, not that it was in the film. These are all. Then I do a section on poetry as part of the Occam's Looking Glass. I'm working on an edition of T.S. Eliot's poems, and I'm illustrating the poems. I've been sending them to various publishers. I've had some pretty good feedback on that. This is The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, and the text and that. These are all self-generated projects. No one is telling me I have to do this. This is the cover to the article that Jorge and I are working on. It's the essay portion of the Occam's Looking Glass. And what it is, it's a study of Giambattista Tiepolo's famous fresco in Würzburg, Germany at the Treppenhaus. It happens to be the largest mural fresco in the world, twice the size of the Sistine Chapel. But nobody ever seems to know anything about it. And these are illustrations that go along with the article. It's an interdisciplinary article, and Jorge and I are working with an author he knew in Argentina, Jorge Borges, and also Wittgenstein, and then we're integrating music, mathematics, the arts, architecture, opera, is all integrated in the article. Then I do a lot of drawing, and these are small drawings that are then put into a grid that can be moved around. This is Thrice Told Tales, A Connection. This is a group picture of when I was a child. This is at a picnic during Labor Day. And I'll go quickly through these. This is my birth home, my mom and dad. We went to California in 1953-54. While in California, I actually went with my mom and dad to visit and saw Disneyland being built. It was in 1953-54, and it was in Anaheim, and there were just citrus orchards and dirt and earth movers. That was Disneyland for me until I went to it years later.
Oh.
Also, at that time on television, there was Max Fleischer had the first combining of a cartoon image with a human being before Disney. And it was called From the Inkwell, and it really influenced me. It made me think about what it really means to be an artist and to dip your pen into an inkwell. Until recently, I only did drawings with a dip pen. I'm from Watertown, Connecticut. This is my home. This is my mother's family, the Delands. My dad's family, immigrants from Russia. My grandparents were the immigrants. My great-grandfather, Roderick Deland, was a self-taught artist, and I followed from him. I remember as a kid going into the basement of my grandmother's house and seeing his old paint box and his easel, and it just inspired me like crazy. This is his portrait of George Washington after the battle at Yorktown. It used to hang in my grandmother's house at the top of the stairs, and we kids would run up the stairs to see Grandma, and we would all yell, "Hi, George!" And that's my brother and I running up the stairs yelling to, "Hi, George." I copied my grandfather's paintings. We still have the originals. This is a lot behind my grandmother's house. It was called Craig's Lot. And we used to fish in that little stream. We used to catch crawdads. We'd slide in the winter in the back lots. This is Christmas in my house in 91 Millbury Road, Watertown, Connecticut. All 8 children plus several relatives. This is my sister's cover to her book, How the Elf and the Tree Came to Be. When she was 5 years old, she had pneumonia and almost died. And I was in an art class at the time, and I made a wooden angel and gave it to her after she got out of the, for her birthday when she got out of the hospital. She lives in Tennessee now. She still has the angel. So we called them Little Angel Books. The Elf and the Tree. The stories are based on her 3 granddaughters who come down from New York City where they live to visit her in the mountains of Tennessee. So she's writing these books for her granddaughters. I won't go into the story. There's the elf. Everything in these images are all my sister's house in Tennessee. And I did one for each of the seasons. That's me and my sister when I was 12 and she was 5 after she got out of the hospital. This is the last one I'll show you. Classic pinups through the ages. I'll read to you just, and this will be the end of my talk. The manuscript is 584 pages. There are original black and white ink and watercolor illustrations of 328 works of art from 21 recognized museums in the United States. It took me 8 years, $20,000, and trips back and forth between the West and East Coast to visit every one of these museums, not once, but sometimes twice and 3 times, to do the original drawings from the original artwork. There are also 12 color plates dispersed at appropriate historical intervals throughout the 6 chapters. 18 by 24 oil-on-canvas paintings by the author. This was done in Albuquerque where I rented a studio and I hired a model. Her name was Gustafson, Christine Gustafson, and she was a professional model and she modeled for me. She posed in outfits that I bought for her that were originally the kind of outfit worn by the models that we were portraying. So Miss Gustafson has posed in the oil painting with 12 famous pin-up women of the mid-20th century. Museums represented are the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, Boston Museum, Clark Art Institute, Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Frick, the Art Institute Chicago, Cleveland Art Institute, Cincinnati Museum of Art, Indianapolis Museum of Art, where I lived for 14 years, the Getty Museum of Antiquities in California, the Getty Museum itself, 2 separate museums, the Ashmolean Museum in Hartford, Connecticut, Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, Florida, where I did a major project for a company I was working for in New York City, National Gallery in D.C., the Hirshhorn in D.C., the Smithsonian, the Morgan Library, the New Mexico Museum of Art, the Kimball Museum of Art here in Texas, and the Huntington Museum. One other thing I want to mention to you is that people don't realize this, but the largest museum devoted to pin-up nose art of aircraft in World War II is here in Texas.
Oh, wow.
And this is a book by someone who works with it. It's called The Confederate Air Force in Harlingen, Texas. It's between Corpus Christi and Brownsville. So I'll go through, this is the last, and then I'll get out of your way. So this is historical. It starts 20,000 years ago. These are prehistoric figurines that are done of the female figure. Most of these are fertility figures, because a lot of what goes on about women, obviously, is reproduction, keeping the human race going, and a lot of the artwork in these early ages were all about that subject. Classical Greece and Rome. This is an incredible sculpture at the Getty Antiquities Museum in Santa Monica. I also have a chapter on Asian art. Even though this is focused really on Western art, I could not avoid doing Japan and India and China. This is through the Renaissance to the modern. I have a funny story about, let's see, Betty Grable, and it was A Sentimental Journey. The reason you've probably seen this image of her many times. The reason she's posed this way because she was pregnant at the time. Oh. She said, I don't want to look forward.
Oh, no.
The other thing that people don't realize is that in the latter part of the 20th century, as many women artists are now doing the pinup figure of women as there are men. It didn't used to be that way, obviously, because of the male gaze. But now we have a lot of women who are doing that, and one of them is interesting. Her name is Molly Siri, and she has a book that flips. On one side, bad girls, good girls.
Oh no.
Now this would, you'd have to see this really close up, but this is a step-by-step how I do my paintings. So it starts with, this was the model that she was posing as in that bathing suit, and then I used the background from a Fra Filippo Lippi painting from the early Italian Renaissance as a background. And then I do a complete pencil drawing, 18 by 24, that's the background. Then I put the layout in, and then I move forward with the color in the same way as in the Skin Tones book that I was talking about. These are quick sketches from the live model. These are the 18 paintings. I'm sorry, 12 paintings. And then this is what I submitted for your anthology. And I took the title, Forever Cotton and Wind Under Western Skies. That's it. I know I went over time, I'm sorry.
We're going to have you back, so you're more.
Well, this is like a semester's course in 20 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, I love that.
I will leave you with one last thing. The only really big published thing I've ever done in my life is the first ever Guide to American Art Schools. It was published by G.K. Hall in Boston and New York, London with Penguin Books.
Wow. Excellent.
Unfortunately, no longer in print.
Oh.